To ask the Tánaiste and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment to update the House on the progress made with the ratification of the International Labour Organisation Convention on Violence and Harassment, noting the Cabinet decision there, I think, at the end of last month to progress that and the next steps in advance of ratification, please.
Thank Deputy Carroll MacNeill for the question. Violence and harassment in the workplace is unacceptable and undermines the principles of human rights. We have comprehensive legislation in Ireland to protect against this, and the ILO Convention sends a clear signal to workers and employers that every workplace must be free from harassment and violence. I committed to Ireland being an early ratifier of this convention, and I'm particularly pleased that we've met the timeline to ratify the convention before the end of this year, in line with Minister McEntee's new Zero Tolerance Action Plan on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. Since the Government approved its ratification on the 29th of November 2022, my department has engaged with the Department of Foreign Affairs and the ILO to arrange the signing of the instrument of ratification by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the depositing of the treaty with the ILO in Geneva. We expect to complete the process by the end of this year. The International Labour Organisation is unique in the UN system, with governments, workers and employers working together to promote decent work and advance social justice. I want to recognise IBEC and ICTU for their work on this. The strong relationship we have with employer and employee representative bodies is fundamental to our ability to play an active role within the ILO. The world of work has altered so much since 1923, when Ireland as a new state joined the ILO, its first international organisation. And I'm pleased that Ireland, through ratification of this ILO Convention, is once again taking a strong stand against violence and harassment in the workplace.
Your response is very welcome, and particularly as it is in tandem with the implementation of the third strategy under the Department of Justice. And I know that your department conducted a stakeholder consultation in relation to it, and I'd be just interested on the tenor of some of the responses that came back and the extent to which they highlighted, as you have said, gender harassment and sexual harassment within the workplace. It's quite striking that the convention itself leads so strongly with gender-based violence and harassment disproportionately affecting women and girls, and how difficult that can make the working life for them. And indeed, we've heard from victims of sexual harassment that when it happens in the workplace, it's so often a surprise. It's so often that the victim simply freezes, just genuinely cannot believe that it has happened in what should be a safe space, the place that they go to work. Women face a whole spectrum, women in particular face a whole spectrum of sexual harassment, but for that to occur in the workplace where they have to go every day or have to participate every day, albeit sometimes remotely now, it makes life extremely difficult. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. The Convention is a legal instrument which recognises the right of everyone to a world of work free from violence and harassment, including gender-based violence and harassment as well. It acknowledges that gender-based violence and harassment disproportionately affects women and girls, as the Deputy said. The Convention calls for states to recognise and address this as far as is possible, and to minimise the effect of domestic violence and harassment at work. The introduction of domestic violence leave by the Department of Children, Equality and Disability Integration and Youth goes beyond what's required by the Convention and does represent tangible action by the Government in this regard. Ratification of the Convention is listed as a deliverable in the implementation plan for the third national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. Other actions in that strategy provide an excellent response to C190's requirements in respect to victims of gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work.
Thank you, Tánaiste. And actually, the timing of this is wonderful, because the Gender Equality Committee, which you participated in at an earlier stage, will publish its report on Thursday, December 15th, in relation to ending gender stereotyping, in particular in Ireland. And so much of this, as the Convention recognises, comes from what has been an unequal gender-based power relationship for many, many years. And I'd suggest that perhaps the department could also lean into the Department of Education in relation to its programme on relationship and sexual education, which is really the only way to effect long-term intergeneral change, a cultural change of the kind that's necessary to disrupt those unequal power relationships which form the basis for so much of gender and other harassment, but particularly gender harassment.
Just again to thank the Deputy for her contribution, and we'll certainly do that. We're keen to work across government and across different departments to get this right and to make some real changes in these areas. And one of the things I've been pleased to be involved in the past number of years is increasing the number of women who hold positions on state boards and on company boards. We've made real progress in that regard. It's more or less 50-50 or 45-55 on state boards, and we're well over 30% now on the boards of listed companies. Where it's still pretty weak, actually, is at the C-suite level, at the CEO, CFO, CPO, that level. So boards much better, leadership positions really not great. And I think these things will only fundamentally change in a workplace if there's an equal number of women in those senior positions in the first place. That's not to say men can't be harassed by women, but it is much less likely to occur. But again, something that's very much on the agenda.